Hello crafty friends, it's Alicia here with a project for Tailored Expressions. In today's video, I'm going to be making a colorful typographic birthday card that you can personalize for a loved one in your life. Today's card features a lot of die cutting. I will be using the square stacklets, stitch numbers, and stitched alpha die sets. Other products I'll be using to help decorate the card is the Splatter Background stamp, All Together birthday stamp with coordinating die, and Mini Strips birthday stamp with coordinating die. For cardstock, I got out Blue Raspberry, Jelly Donut, Lollipop, and Sugar Cube, and I'll also be using some Tailored Expressions Vellum. To add even more color, I'm using OLO markers, glitter drip drops in teal, purple, and pink, and Lollipop, Blue Raspberry, and Jelly Donut ink pads for stamping. And speaking of stamping, I will also be using an Oreo ink pad, and to get nice crisp impressions, I'm using the exclusive Teal Misty and the Just Press tool. To help hold everything together, I got out a variety of adhesives. Let's get crafty! To get started, I will be using the Splatter Background stamp and the 3 colorful inks on 2 pieces of sugar cube cardstock that are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Because I can't use the magnet and I will be switching these pieces of cardstock out, I did put a little tape runner on the back of the first piece and took off a little of the tack with my finger before placing it down in the bottom corner where the My Sweet Petunia label is on the Misty. Then I place that background stamp face down on top of this, and you just want to do your best to try to get that piece of cardstock covered. Because this is a splatter background, it doesn't have to be perfect. Once that is picked up with the door of the Misty, I ink it up with the first ink, and in this case it is Lollipop. To make sure I got a good impression, I did use the Just Press tool, and now what I'm going to do is set this piece to the side, making sure to keep it in the same orientation as it was on the Misty. Then I'll bring in that second piece of sugar cube cardstock, once again adding a little adhesive to the back, and I'm going to place it in that same exact corner as I did the first one. And again, this will be inked up and stamped with Lollipop ink. Now, using that same piece of sugar cube cardstock, I'm going to remove it and move it up and over 1 square on that background grid on the Misty. Before moving on to my second ink, I did go ahead and clean and dry the background stamp just so I wouldn't contaminate any of my ink pads. Then I inked up this stamp once again with Jelly Donut, and once the first piece of sugar cube had the purple splatters, I brought in that first one, and when I put it back on the Misty, I did make sure that it was moved up and over 1, just like I did with that previous piece. Now I'm going to stamp on that same piece of sugar cube, but for this one I turned it 180 degrees and put it back in the original corner that it started on. Again, I cleaned off the stamp and then proceeded with the blue raspberry ink on both pieces. Now you could easily personalize something like this to the favorite colors of your recipient, and this is just a fun background you can create yourself, and again, because it splatters, it doesn't have to look perfect. Since I already had the Misty out, I went ahead and got out the All Together birthday stamp and Mini Strips birthday. I cut a couple scraps of sugar cube, and then I placed one of the stamps on each square. For these, I will be using Oreo ink, and I did ink it up and stamp it a couple times to get a nice crisp impression. I do end up with many more sentiments and images that I need for today's card, but I did just keep these for future projects, and I even used a couple pieces on the inside for decoration. Now I'm going to do some super simple coloring with OLO markers. I chose 3 images and each one will be a single color. Because these are pretty small, I won't be doing any shading, so I got out a single color for each. For Jelly Donut, I chose BV 1.4. For Blue Raspberry, I chose BG 2.4. For Lollipop, I got out RV 1.5, and to the bottom of that cupcake, the liner, I added just a little bit of gray with Cool Gray number 1. I took both of these pieces off camera to die cut them, making sure to line up the alignment squares on the die with the stamped squares. To continue with die cutting, I brought in the stitch numbers and stitched alpha dies, and from the alphabet set I got out HBD for happy birthday, and then I got out the 1 and the 9 from the numbers. I'm actually creating this card for my daughter who is turning 19 later on this month. To hold the dies in place while I run it through the die cutter, I use some pieces of Scotch removable tape, and I started with just one set of the HBD on that sprinkle background that we created and one set of the 19. Here is what they look like. They're just kind of fun, kind of confetti letters. And now I'm going to continue cutting more of the 19s from this piece. I did just use that same piece of removable tape, and I ended up cutting 12 sets of 19, and then I also cut some copies in the colorful cardstock for shadows. I did one in purple or one in jelly donut for HBD, and then for the 19s I did 4 in each of the colors. You'll see here I did have some more of the sprinkle cardstock left, and later I did end up having to cut a few more. To get the shadows added, I put liquid glue on the front of the colorful cardstock piece. So in this case, on the front of the blue raspberry. Then I'm going to take the sprinkle copy of the one and place that up and to the left just a little bit. I did find that the stitching detail in the center of each of the numbers and letters made for a really great guide. I continued adding the shadows to the rest of the letters and the numbers, and most of this I did do off camera just because it was pretty repetitive. Once all of my 19s had time to dry, I brought back in the second sprinkle piece, which I had cut down to 4 by 5 1/4. Now I'm going to start adding the 19s to the background to kind of create my own textured pattern paper. To make sure everything is nice and aligned, I use the grid on the grid paper placemat to lay those down, and then I pick them up very carefully with a piece of Scotch removable tape. Now I'm going to get some liquid glue added to the back and place this onto the card front. I put this angled a little to the left and up in that top left hand corner. Now I'm going to grab another 19. This one has the blue raspberry shadow. Lay it on the grid in the same way, but when I go to place this onto the card front, I'm going to angle it the opposite way and put it down and to the right of the first one. I continued adding the rest of those 19s, changing the angle and the shadow color as I went along. Now, if you don't think your recipient would want their age plastered all over their card front, instead of using the 19, you could use multiple copies of HBD. Just make it fun. You can definitely take this idea and use it for different occasions and different recipients. Here is a look at the finished dried piece. If you want to pause the video here to follow along with mine, you can. Once it was completely dry, I brought in some scissors and just cut off the excess. As I mentioned before, I did have to cut some more of the 19s and shadows. I ended up cutting 5 more sets of the 19. I did 3 in the jelly donut and 2 in the blue raspberry. I wanted to make a portion of this background stand out a little bit, so I brought in the square stacklets and I used the 1/8 from the largest to cut a portion out of the top center of the 19 piece. While I was off camera cutting that, I used the 7th from largest on a scrap of Lollipop and the 9th from largest on a scrap of TE Vellum. I added that Lollipop mat to the back of the pattern piece with some tape runner, and now before I can put the vellum square on, I need to decorate that to find out where I can hide the adhesive. Off camera, I made a top fold blue raspberry card base, and now I'm going to add the large pattern piece to the front center of this with tape runner, keeping it nice and flat for now. Also, while I was off camera, I added foam tape to the back of that center square just so I'd have a little dimension and set this apart from the background a little bit. And so I would have some time, some wiggle time to get it nice and situated correctly. I did add liquid adhesive to the foam before placing it onto the card base. Next, I got my little piece of vellum decorated. I added the HBD to the middle of the square, and then I placed the colorful little icons around that. I made the hat look like it was a hat for the bee, and then angled the other two pieces and added them with liquid glue. Now that I know where everything goes on the vellum, I'm able to add the liquid adhesive behind the letters and the icons and get it placed onto the square on the card base. As a companion sentiment to the HBD, I brought in the Make-A-Wish sentiment that we stamped and cut earlier and added this with liquid glue down on the bottom left of the vellum square. Now to finish the card off, I added a few glitter drip drops on the front, and on the inside I added one more of the sentiments and some cute little colorful balloons. And here are some close-up looks at the finished card. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch today's video. If you enjoyed the process, a thumbs up is appreciated. And if you're not already a subscriber, we do hope you'll click on the button below so you're the first to know about our latest videos. To find out more about the products I used today, you can check out the links in the description box below or visit the Tailored Expressions online store at tailoredexpressions.com.